Hello everyone. I wanted to do a video on setting up the Raspberry Pi with Kali Linux. I use a Raspberry Pi because it's a low cost device and easy to set up. And if you break some software within Kali Linux, it's fairly easy just to reflash the SD card and start all over again. So I download the image from Kali Linux website and I use the Raspberry Pi imager. I'll leave the URLs below. So I download the image, extract it. I use Raspberry Pi imager. You can get that from the Raspberry Pi website. I'm using a 32 gigabyte SD card. Here's the URL where you can get the Raspberry Pi imager. And there's tons of information here too on how to flash a Raspberry Pi. It's a pretty good read. I'm using Windows as a machine, so I'll download it for Windows. Of course, you can use it with Mac OS, or you can download it for Ubuntu as well. Basically, when I open up the imager, I'll go to the custom, and then I'll find my Raspberry Pi Kali Linux image. Then I'll choose the 32 gigabyte SD card. And the other options, there's not much sense in going into these other options. I'm just showing them to you. Kali Linux will override all of this stuff when you write to the SD card anyways. So I'll go and I'll write to the SD card. And what I'll do is I'll pause the video here because this will take a little bit of time. So once I have my SD card imaged, I'll put it in my Raspberry Pi. I'll connect it to my network. I have a pretty good idea what the IP address of the Raspberry Pi is. So then I'll SSH into the Kali Linux Raspberry Pi. Default password for the device is Kali. Default user is Kali. And here's just a couple of things that I do to set myself up. The first thing I'll do is I'll CD into the host name. I'll just cat the host name just to see what it's named. Well, we know what it's named. Then I'll sudo nano host name so that I can change the name to something I like a little better. I'll change it to Kali Rasp 3B. Then what I like to do is I like to change the default password. So I'll change that default password to a password I like. And then at the same time, I'll set the default password for the root user. A lot of hacking tools that are found within Kali Linux, you need to have escalated privileges. So I personally like using the root. You can use sudo. So because I have a fresh lineage, a fresh install of Kali Linux, I'll move into the root user. And the first thing I like to do is I like to do apt update along with apt upgrade. You can add a dash y at the end of this. I normally don't do this because I like to see what it's actually going to install, and to see if there's any pieces of software that are not needed on the device. This will take a couple of minutes, so what I'll do is I'll pause the video here and allow it to catch up. So as you can see, there's a couple of packages that are not needed anymore. We'll address that later. So I'll press Y to continue and basically download all the updates for my Kali Linux. So after that's been completed, the next thing I like to do is make sure that I'm in the right time zone. So here's the command to see what time zone I'm in. I'm not in the correct time zone. I'm in Atlantic Canada. So here's a quick here's the quick command to find a list of time zones. You just scroll down through this list. The time zone I'm looking for is either America slash Halifax or Canada slash Atlantic. I see Canada slash Atlantic there. So I'll copy this. Control C to get out of here. I did America slash Halifax here. It failed, but I believe that's just because I didn't capitalize America and Halifax. So I'll use what I copied. And just a quick check. And now I'm in the proper time zone. So next thing I like to do is like to do an auto remove of all the packages that I don't need anymore. This takes a couple of seconds. So the next thing I like to do is I like to add a tool called Evil WinRM. This tool becomes useful for auditing Windows machines. It's just a great tool to have. It's not included in Kali Linux, so you have to manually install it. Um, Maybe I'll do a video on the use of this tool at a later time. Um, then what I'll do is I'll start the Postgres SQL service on my Raspberry Pi. Basically, the reason why I do this is to start the setup of the Metasploit database. So the command there is msfdb init. This will basically set up your database for Metasploit. After that database gets set up, I'll run a MSN or MSF console, basically to start Metasploit up. Um, Make sure that it's attached to the database. Uh, I'll run a couple of commands, host or workspace, just to make sure that everything's kind of set up properly. Um, it's just a good habit to get into. After I've checked this all out, I'll reboot my Kali Linux or my Raspberry Pi, um, and I'll just quickly check to make sure that it comes back online. Log into it, and there you have it. You have a Raspberry Pi with Kali Linux installed on it, ready to do some hacking. Happy hacking, everybody.